Thanks, Christine. It's really lovely to be here today and to be amongst so many friends and familiar faces. Um, I was part of the pedal team as the policy fellow here for a brilliant couple of years, which ended in October, and I now work at the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood. And that's sort of ironic given the topic we're talking about today, because as a Royal Foundation Centre, we can't influence policy. That's very clear as a boundary we have as the difference between the royalty and the government. However, what we do, I think, is create a context in which policy change can happen, because we can change the national dialogue and debate and beliefs. And obviously, policy making doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the people who make policy are very concerned about what the general public value and care about. So I do think we do play a role in creating a context where there is good policy being made, and supportive of that. We have great relationships behind the scenes with government and others, but we don't do policy influencing. I have to make that really clear. So my presentation is not actually today going to be about the Royal Foundation, but I didn't want to be here and not just tell you a little bit about us and what we do, because I would love to do more with many of you. The Princess of Wales came to the early childhood sector not because she's the mum of 3 children, although that is always on her mind, but because she has a big vision for society. She very much wants to create a more nurturing and more connected society. She sees issues around isolation and disconnection, and she has this vision for humanity reconnected with each other and connected to our natural world as well. And she really sees the opportunities we have of creating nurturing environments around our babies and young children and developing their social and emotional skills as a really important way to build this society in the future. And the interesting thing about working in a royal charity compared to anywhere else I've ever worked is that she is really thinking about the next 50, 80 years of her kind of royal life and what she might do in that time. And so we are really thinking big about that. So we are a centre. I'm conscious, I'm looking at this thinking my slides have gone, that's not the font I put on them, but anyway, it's fine. Where we are using the Princess's platform and her profile to raise awareness across society of the importance of early childhood, and particularly within that children's social and emotional development. And we published in what's in the bottom of this screen our social and emotional development framework earlier this year, which just talks in a way that we hope can resonate across the whole of society. And has been very much tested with kind of communities, lots of different communities, a way of talking about social and emotional development. So we talk, for example, about managing emotions, focusing thought. We don't talk about things like executive function, or although we mean those things, but we've got a way of talking about this that has to resonate. We're doing an increasing amount of work to support quality in the early childhood workforce across health, education, the voluntary sector and others, and you'll see more from that in the coming years. But we're also putting early childhood in places and spaces where it's not often thought about and valued, and we have the opportunity to do that through the Princess's patronages and platforms she can get. So we can do a lot of work with business, for example, and we're doing work with other kind of national institutions. So the tree on this slide is part of an exhibit we had in the National Portrait Gallery, where there was a trail for under 5s around the gallery, and they were looking at the pictures of people and their emotional expressions and what that might mean, and then they were talking about feelings. And a lovely thing about this was this tree was growing as the start of the trail right in the lobby of the National Portrait Gallery. And as you will know, very often the things for little kids are kind of somewhere in the basement. And so there's something about that statement of there's something that's really high quality right in the centre of a national institution that's for 0 to 5. So it's an exciting place to be, but that's not what I'm going to talk to you about today. When I was here at Pedal, I ran the Mobilise programme, where we brought civil servants and other people involved in public policy and policy delivery from across the UK together to learn together about early child development, and then to think together about how they could use that in their practice. I presented on that at last year's conference, so I'm not going to present on that today. And Paul asked me to pull together some kind of wider lessons about what is it that supports policy change, and how can we collectively, as academics, as service providers and professionals, support positive policy change. And when I had this phone call with Paul about this, I was actually at that time writing a set of kind of a framework for what is it that children need in early childhood from the people around them. And I was looking at the list I was writing and thinking, actually, there's lots of common messages. So today, what I'm going to talk about is the commonalities between what babies and young children need to thrive and what works in supporting policy change. And then as I was coming on the train here, I was thinking, I really hope this doesn't suggest that policymakers are very similar and akin to babies and young children. But there's no infantilization of the sector here. We are all children inside and we all need the same things. But so I've got just a set of kind of principles I'm going to talk about. Anyone who knows me, and a few people have reflected this back to me already today, knows that I talk a lot about relationships. And it is, I think, all about relationships. What kids need, what adults need, what we all need. And I think changing policy is all about relationships. So this is a slide from an event a couple of weeks ago. And this is Susie Owers is a director in the department who leads on early childhood. I think, and I've seen a lot in the sector, this idea that we change policy, us, the people who know and care about children, telling them, the people in Whitehall, what they need to do and saying, we've got this research that shows, these are the right ratios, or children need more play, and we're going to tell you about it. And then we're really going to get quite cross that we don't see action on that. And actually, that is not how to change policy. People like Susie and many of the other civil servants in Whitehall, she was just the one unfortunate enough to be found on a photo I could find on a website, know that evidence really well. They're really committed to children, just like we are, and they're not the only people who are making decisions. They also work in complex systems where they have to persuade others in their department, people in the Treasury, people in Number 10, the rest of the system to take action. So we work best at changing policy when we see ourselves as allies working together, bringing different perspectives and voices to bring change. And it's not us and them, it's us together, because there's an awful lot of people in society who haven't got young children in mind. So let's make sure that we get together. And if we build opportunity, if we build relationships, we can collectively see where there might be opportunities to change things and where we might use our research or our insights from frontline practice to help support that case for change. What else do kids need? Kids need shared attention. We know children learn best if we start by what they're paying attention to, not by what we want to tell them. And the same is true of policymakers. But also we can frame what we're talking about in terms of the things that they are paying attention to. So we know, for example, and as Stephen said earlier, that school readiness is a goal for this government at the moment. We may not all like that term, we may not all agree with it, but that is what the government has set out, and that is our best hook at which we're going to get any progress on talking about early childhood. So we can talk about why it's a slightly difficult measure, but ultimately the more we frame what we're doing in terms of supporting school readiness, the more likely we are that that will get traction in the places where decisions are made. I'm really sorry what's happened to these slides. They did look much prettier than this, but something's gone really wrong in the translation. Children need sensitive responding. They need adults to notice what they care about and to respond to that. And it's the same with policymakers. So when I came to Cambridge, I really saw this model of we've just finished our piece of research, we've found result X, and that is what we're going to tell you about, policymakers. Irrespective of what the decisions were, what the context was, that was the model. And that's the model that a lot of funding in academia supports. You get funding to do 2 years of research, and then you get funding to tell people about it. But actually, if we're really going to support policymakers, we need to start, as we did with the Mobilise programme, with what do they care about? What are they at? What are the questions and issues that they're trying to solve? And then how can we curate our research to help that? And then just 2 other very quick points, because I know I'm out of time. Young children need consistency. And if we look at the organisations that have successfully changed policy in the UK, they have really thought about consistency. So the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, which has led to an enormous change in the provision of mental health services for new mums, has a lot of organisations who've come together and will all say the same thing about what government needs to do on perinatal mental health. And importantly, they haven't all got a vested interest in it. Some of them aren't the people who'll be funded by that work, but they also bring together practitioner voices, lived experience voices, and research. And everybody is saying the same in different ways, consistent messages. And then finally, what do children need? They need developmentally appropriate expectations. We can't ask too much of them. We need to think about that zone of proximal development. What is the next thing? What's achievable? And Another thing that the Maternal Mental Health Alliance did was say, well, there is a set of national standards for what services look like. They're already there. Some services are already delivering this. This is a doable thing. And that's what we're going to ask for. We're not going to ask you to change the world, even though we might like it. We know this is this is the next step you can take, and you definitely can take it as government. And that's the thing, and that's what's going to get changed. So just a few thoughts on some of those principles about what helps us to all collectively work together to get policies that work for babies and young children.